I'll sit closer to the.
Alright, so welcome to AWS User Group Meetup. Yay!
Yay!
Come on, give me some support. My name is Anjali. Yes, that's about it. That's it. Good job. That's all you need to know. My name is Arzumi. I'm going to be your host tonight.
Okay.
You guys are late. Eat fast. Alright, so tonight we're going to have, before that, this is our hashtag, so if you tweet about anything, just use this hashtag. If you tweeted about this meetup without using this hashtag, Aaron's going to hunt you, and he's going to hug you. You don't want that.
I didn't tweet, I use Facebook.
Alright, so tonight we have Jeannie. She's going to share about iOS development using AWS SDK, right? And then we're going to have Aaron who's going to talk about security on AWS and how you lock down your AWS services. And then we're going to have Marco here to secret demo. With a secret demo. I'm sure you haven't figured out what you're going to do. You're going to think about it in the next 20 minutes. So after this, we can talk about 20 minutes, but don't really have. If everybody's still fine with you talking here, then just keep on talking. If people start leaving, then you know you better stop, right? I don't want people to leave this event without finishing it. So without further ado, Jeannie, do you need a slide? She forgot to ask you. Okay, then we can fill up the slide. Okay, completely my bad. I forgot to ask her for a slide. So just wait for like 2 minutes. So, yeah.
Okay, you got 2 minutes.
Okay, loading. Alright, so who's here for the first time? 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, you guys have to come to the stage and sing.
Quartet.
I'm actually serious.
Quartet.
Okay, in. And alright, she's gonna hijack the.
Don't say that.
Alright, cool. Alright, give it up to Jeannie.
What in the world?
Sorry, I'm going to have to sit down because otherwise I don't have anywhere to put this.
Yeah.
Thanks already. Thanks.
It's okay.
Thanks already.
I'm quite comfortable.
Okay. You want us to bring you a table?
You want a table?
We can help you a table.
What?
I think everyone can see me,
We have
right?
that table.
Everyone can see now?
Yes.
Okay.
Do I have to stand?
That's fine.
No, I can sit. Yeah.
You need to hold the mic, please.
Okay, so I'm going to talk a bit about my experience using the AWS iOS SDK while building my new app called Stretchables. So Stretchables is supposed to be an app to help you to manage your AWS services.
Okay.
Yeah. So how these apps started in the first place was, so me and my partner Adrian, we have a few instances and services on AWS that we need to manage from time to time, and it mostly came from Adrian because he has got a lot of servers to take care of. And sometimes when you're on the go and you need to do something or you need to look up something, and you have access to a computer, and we all know that the dashboard doesn't work so well on mobile screens.
Marco?
And the AWS console app is okay, maybe not.
This is an open It's an open dialogue. Feel free to, talk as much as you need. It's no problem.
It's terrible, okay?
So Adrian said, let's build one.
Hey.
Right? So we did. So we built our app stretchables. We've got support for the base, what we call the baseline services that you need to manage your EC2 services, instances for those snapshots, elastic IPs, group repair. We originally built in support for S3, and then as we were going through the beta testing stage, some of our testers said, hey, we want something a bit full-featured. So the code's there, the module's there, we just disabled it until we can really polish the hell out of it. So maybe it will come out in a 1.1. Yeah. We also have done some work on monitoring load balancer and reserve instances. We just haven't completed them yet. Things that we could put in the future would be things like SNS, SQS, SES. Basically, as long as the Amazon APIs provide for it, we can do it. So that's good. And speaking of the Amazon SDK, the code agent is bloody huge. Right, it's really massive. This is the documentation. There's a list of classes at the sidebar there. And you can take a look at how small the scroll bar is. And you scroll down the page, and there's like a next button, and you see how, right there. And you click on the next, and it goes to another page that's equally with the scroll bar equally as small as this. Okay, it's really massive. So we decided to use the SDK instead of writing our own API calls using standard HTTP APIs because no way we're going to write. We'll have to write the entire library before we start on the app if we don't use the SDK. So which is why we chose to go with the SDK. Because with what we had in mind and with the extensions that we had in mind, it was just a logical thing to do. Yeah. Lots of files to compile. So the AWS iOS SDK, for the most part, is actually quite alright. It's quite straightforward to use. One thing to get used to would be that everything is in a request-response object pair. So every time you want to make a request, you have to make a specific request object for that specific thing. So if you want to make a request to get your list of instances, that object and the request to get a list of volumes are two very different request objects. So they're not like a generic request object that you can just use. And the results goes into a corresponding response object. So now you can see how the SDK got so big because everything's in pairs, and on top of that, these pairs further translate into another pair, which is basically the serializers and the unserializer. Right, so you create a request object, and then the request object gets passed into a request serializer, and then only it actually makes the actual request. And when the results come back, it goes, you reverse it. It goes into the unmarshaller to deserialize it, and then it goes into the response object. Yeah, so this is a typical request and the response. Right, so in this case, the EC2 described instance request basically gets a list of all your instances, and the response will actually return you an array of EC2 instances, basically. And then from there, you can actually grab everything that you want out of your EC2 instance. So, for example, you can get the instance ID, the type, the size, and whatever, everything imaginable, basically. So it's actually quite complete. Really, it's actually really complete and freaking comprehensive. So thanks to Amazon for that. But But there is one thing that I don't really like about the iOS SDK a lot, which is we ended up wrapping a lot of our code in a try-catch block. Why? Because everything throws an exception, including errors. Yeah. Including authentication errors. So, so I had a complaint from one of our beta testers who keyed in his credentials wrong, and he said it kept crashing. We were like, "This is crashing, should we crash?" So I purposely made a typo in my access key, and it crashed because it raised an exception. So I was like, why is it raising an exception? This is the auth error, not the exception. So after some digging around, I found out that there is this thing which is turned off by default, and you have to call it if you want this behavior, which is the error should not throw exceptions. So after we turned this on, we had a bit more sanity back. But yeah, I personally I feel that this should have been default in the first place, because recoverable errors, or rather non-programming errors, such as authentication errors, should not throw an exception. In the case of iOS, an uncaught exception would crash it's like getting into the server and error coming.
Yeah.
So I think that's quite bad design, if I may say. Sorry.
In terms of counter argumenting the things that you mentioned just now, would it be better to actually fine-grain exceptions so that
yeah, well, the exceptions are pretty. Okay, let's take the example of an authentication error, right? When you log in to a web-based system somewhere, let's say you log into Facebook, right?
Yeah.
And you key in your wrong password, you shouldn't get a 500 error back. Right? You will get an error message saying that, authentication error, please, key in your correct password.
Get a 401.
Yeah, you should get a 401 or something, not a 500. So in this case, the equivalent would be 500 is the exception. You should be getting a 400 instead, which is an error. Yeah. And in this case, it actually does throw an error. It does actually have an error. It's just that the error is throwing an exception. So a bit convoluted, but yeah, I think this should be default. So, but apart from this major beef that I have with the exceptions, the SDK is actually really comprehensive, really pretty good once you get used to the pairs. So to me, it's not really possible to actually work with the SDK without having the documentation open side by side. But yeah. So we built the app stretchables. We've been working on it for quite a while. Not full time. As and when we have some free time. We have submitted it to the App Store, so hopefully it will be approved soon. And I'm going to show you the app. Sorry?
Did you connect your iPhone to the back?
Oh, then I can just try and see.
She's using an X
Yeah, so
emulator.
So this is stretchables. You can have multiple accounts. I know some of you, ourselves included, we have multiple AWS accounts to manage, so you can do that. And you can see an overview of your running instances. and stop instances. You can set a default region. You can switch between regions if you want to. You can get a list of all your instances. In this case, we mark it very clearly which one's running and which one's not. So let's say, for example, you've got this instance over here. You can see all the details and you can start it up. Alright, so as it's starting up, then maybe I'll take a look at this one that's already running. Right, and likewise, you can stop and reboot the instance. We don't have terminate instance for very obvious reasons. Right, so that's the instances. And then for volumes, as usual, you can see a list of all your volumes. You can create a volume, including provision IOPS volumes. Choose an availability zone. You can also create a volume and choose a snapshot to restore into as well. Or if you want to take a look at all your snapshots, right? So say for example, this one I want to restore this snapshot and I want to restore it into a new volume. Let's say in US is 1B. I'll just create and okay, it's probably creating. And in your volumes, you can detach a volume that's already attached. You can create a snapshot for this volume, give it a description. If you've got a available volume, you can also attach it. So let's say, for example, I want to mount this onto, say, USB 1C. You can click attach, and now it's attached to the USB 1C. So it's very easy for when you need to just very quickly and you're outside your office or whatever, and you just need to do something quickly. Yeah, and yeah, you see there's this. Just now I restored the snapshot to from USB 1C as well. It's created already. And
notification is something configured for balance.
Yeah, maybe in the point release. It's something that there are a lot of things that we want to do. It's just that if we were to cram it all into 1.0, we will never ship. Yeah. And then we have the ability to create key pairs as well. Unfortunately, the SDK does not actually allow us to retrieve the key pair details. So you can see what key pairs you have already. You can delete a key pair. I'm not going to delete a key pair. But you can create a key pair and email it to yourself. So say, for example, create a test, and then you can create this key pair to whoever did whatever. And then Elastic IP. You can quickly see all your IPs. You can create an IP address. Yeah, okay. So, right. And you can associate or release the IP. So, we will likewise, because once you release an IP, you can't get back the same IP, right? And let's say, for example, I want to associate this IP, and I can choose, say, for example, this one. And there we go, right? And likewise, you can disassociate it. And we also have the ability to manage your security groups. So you can create new groups. You can delete a group if you want. You can see all your inbound outbound rules, and you can create a new rule. Right? So let's say create new, and there we go. Right? So I I think I like to think of it that this is just the beginning. There's a lot more things that we have done but we just took it off the 1.0. So and some of you also, including Azubi, were also beta testing. So thanks.
I haven't tried new update.
Yeah.
You said me new update.
Oh, I said one. Okay, so yeah, we have actually quite a fair bit of stuff that we are working on right now on the app, even though we've just submitted the 1.0. Hopefully we can submit the update soon. You know, things like notifications and monitoring, putting back the S3, which we unfortunately had to take out. So yeah, if any of you would like to download this app when it's available, we'll probably post it up in the group. We do appreciate some feedback as well. If any of you want to join the beta test, yeah, you can find me later, drop me a mail, I'll send you a beta version. And you can also help us to develop the future updates as well, because there are some things, sometimes, you know, different people have different use cases. Let's say, you know, different people use it differently, so we'd like to know how you use an app that's. So it's not meant to replace the AWS dashboard. Right, it's really not meant to do that. It's really meant for you to need to do something quick on the go. So we'd like to know how you would use an app such as this outside. And some of you who are maybe heavy users of services that we may not be heavy users of, for example, SES, I'm not really an SES user. So we already appreciate some of you who use these services to join our beta, so that you can help us to develop that SES module. So yeah, that's it from my part. Questions here?
How do you connect to your account? Do you use like your email and password, or do you use IDIQ?
I am.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how do you actually store those credentials? Is it stored locally, or?
We store locally.
So in a way, if your phone is compromised, is anyone able to retrieve your credentials?
You can revoke your credentials from the Amazon dashboard. So if your phone gets stolen or whatever, you just go to the dashboard, you revoke the A9, and you should be. So when you create a new account that time, we ask you for the access key and the secret. Yeah, so I think that's the practice that AWS recommends as well.
If you do it this way, how am I supposed to key one by one of the access keys? I mean, do you have any knowledge?
Okay, on my simulator you can't see it, but if you have one password installed on your phone, you have a button to open one password to grab your credentials, so you can just copy paste it. Yeah. Any other questions?
An actual password that we have, so can you actually lock the app?
Sorry, can you?
Can you lock the app? Can you lock the app? So again, in the case that you lose your phone, at least there's a password on the app, so people can't go and go forward.
Oh, you mean like a passcode?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that would be a good idea. Yeah.
And 1.1.
Yeah, we could definitely.
I look forward to 1.1.
We could definitely consider that. Yeah, thanks for the suggestion. Yeah. Any more questions?
What about an Android app?
Yeah. Maybe.
Is it open source?
Can't be open.
We have priced it at $4.99. Yeah. So I
The
think
usual.
We feel that it's fair. So we'll see how it goes. If the market demands lower, maybe we'll go lower. If the market says you can go higher, maybe we'll go higher. let's see first. I think that we feel that it's worth more than 99 cents, I think. So, yeah.
That's quite
Will it lower your price as you get more numbers here?
I think the way we'll let the market forces dictate the pricing.
Okay. You're checking?
I think pricing is always the tricky part. You place a price on something and sometimes you never know if it's overpriced or underpriced. And sometimes you feel that it's overpriced, but people still buy anyways. It's a very tricky thing to manage.
So for someone who want to work on AWS, SDK, or iOS, what would be your main advice? This one thing that they should know, apart from what you already showed in the slide.
First order of things, turn on the should have show exceptions.
Right. Yeah.
But I think that if I were to, I would say that read the documentation before you start. Because if you don't read the documentation, given how massive it is, it's really hard to figure things out. We kind of learned it the hard way also because we just downloaded SDK and then after that we were like, okay, where do we start? Like literally, where do we start? So you have to like go through, just read a few, just go through a few times. For the most part, the good thing is that the method, the objects and the class names are actually quite well described. The confusing thing initially would be probably because as I was showing just now, because everything is like in a pair, right? So always remember that every time you create a request, the response will always come out in the corresponding response, right? And if you take a look in the documentation, you will see the status request, marshaller, status response, marshaller, all in blocks of, quintuplets, right? So that could be quite confusing at first. And the thing is, although these are all in the documentation, but you never ever have to actually touch the request marshaller or unmarshaller. Right, those two are actually the serializers. So that is what happens in the background when you create a status request object, right? And then when you call the method to actually, so with the method, you create the request object and then after you pass it to your EC2 client object to call the request itself. And as you call the request, then the request method, which is provided by the SDK, passes that object into the marshaller or the unmarshaller to serialize or deserialize. So the methods that you only need to take note of are the ones that don't have the words marshaller or unmarshaller in it. So I think if somebody can come up with a documentation that strips out all of this, it will probably be a lot less confusing in the beginning. But for somebody who's just starting out with the SDK, it can look quite daunting. So just keep in mind, everything is in a pair. So as long as you keep these two things in mind, the pairs thing and the error exceptions thing, I think you should be fine. It's actually quite fairly straightforward. And every response object is also quite complete in the sense that it's got all the methods, and then it's got the description of the description object as well, and it's got the error objects, everything all in it already. So regardless of whether you called the error should throw exceptions or not, the error is already in the error object inside the response object. So, yeah. Any questions?
do you seek help if you usually bump into problem with the SDK? Or have you ever bumped into a problem using the SDK and you need to ask somebody?
Okay, so the question was where do we seek help if we bump into problems while working with the SDK?
Stack Overflow.
Always, always.
Stack Overflow, the Amazon website. The Amazon website actually has documentation and a lot of examples. There are also example projects, expert projects on GitHub as well from Amazon, right? They have a few examples and they quite nicely categorize it by SNS example or SES example. So, the examples are all there already, but to be honest, we haven't really gotten into a lot of issues with working with the SDK itself, apart from the exceptions thing, which a quick Stack Overflow search yielded the method that we needed to call. For the most part, we actually work mainly by just referring to the documentation, the SDK itself.
Okay, so you have more questions? Okay, go direct to Ginny. So give up to Ginny. I guess one of the biggest takeaway from the presentation just now is read the effing memo.
TFM.
Alright, so now we're going to have Aaron. He's going to talk about something fancy and stuff.
You're my slide guy, ain't
Okay, hold on, boss. Okay, get up to you. You sure it's here somewhere? No, you have a sequence. Dance.
My name's Aaron. I'm going to do a very brief introduction to some of the tools available on AWS to help you secure your cloud implementation. So it will be a very brief introduction, as there are lots. A bit of background: I basically build payment systems in cloud, payments and telcos, and try and convince them that yes, working in the cloud is actually a good thing. Next. So the most common thing I hear when sort of talking to people about that is the cloud, the cloud secure. For the most part, the answer is yep. Yes, it most definitely is, but a lot of it is actually down to you and how you go and put things together. Okay. Under the hood, AWS is actually very, very secure. They have lots of compliances, PCI, VSS, 27.1, there's a long list. I'm not going to go through them all. Nobody cares anyway. But it is secure. Lots of auditors have said so. And as I said, AWS actually provides lots of tools for you guys to use as well, so that when you go and roll out your implementation, it's nice and secure as well. Okay, so let's have a look at a couple of buttons. Before I go on, I'm going to make the rash assumption that you are actually reasonably familiar with AWS and its tools. So you kind of we'll talk slowly. But you understand, regions, availability, all that good hacker stuff. So I'm not going to do that. And I'm also not going to teach you how to write secure code. If you want to do that, go hit the OWASP sites and all that sort of stuff. All the AWS tools. The first one, IAM, Identity and Access Management. One of the more underrated tools for locking down your systems and services. It's really, really cool. So when you've got your Amazon account, you're all freshly signed up, put your credit card details in there and you hope like hell that you're not going to blow the budget. You've got a team of people that you want to actually open this up for. Fine. You can actually go in and create users for each individual. And you can also assigning really tight access controls. So for example, I might want to say, all right, Zoom is only allowed to actually look at EC2 servers.
I want full access.
Sorry?
I want full access.
Nope, cannot. And not will not. Not for you. There's always one in the audience, isn't there? It's going to be you. So, as I said, you can create very fine-grained access controls over all of your resources. So you're like, you can even create policies based around different types and tags you can place on resources. An example would be one of the things that we do is we tag both production, staging and development resources, whether they be EBS volumes, EC2 instances, RDS databases, all that sort of stuff. And then we create access policies for our developers, so they're only allowed to touch things that have got a developer tag on them. They're not allowed to even see any of the other stuff. Likewise for production. So we only allow certain people onto different parts of production as well. So it can actually be really, really cool and really useful for locking stuff right down. For using tools such as Stretchable, for example, you might want to create a separate keys to access and play around with that. The other thing you use as well, I've added on there, is second factor authentication. If you want to be really, really paranoid. So that means that when people actually log into the service, they actually have to have their phone handy with them, and or a little token, and use the Google Authenticator app. If you want to play around with that, that's kind of fun. There was one other thing I wanted to mention on there that I forgot to put, and it's gone. Sorry, my tongue's been really good to me, and I have no memory whatsoever, so we're just going to move right on, and it'll probably come back in a flash of inspiration later. Number 2. Second tool, and this is actually covers a lot of stuff, and we're going to dig down into it a little bit more, and that's VPC, Virtual Private Cloud, and it's all your stuff in one place. Not anybody else's stuff, your stuff. Okay? What VPC does is it gives you basically your own Class C network to play with. You can put any, pretty much any IP address you like in it. For the most part, you probably want to put, 10 dot something or 192.168 or whatever. But it gives you a nice playpen that you can work with, that nobody else can sort of put in there and fudge around with. So it's locked down, pretty tight, which is a good place to start. You just make the holes that you want and allow only those people to access your services. Nearly all AWS services can be launched inside your little playpen. So things like EC2, EBS volumes, load balancers, and you can actually do some pretty cool things with load balancers inside VPC. RDS, Elastication, and a few others. Things like S3, they're more a service rather than sort of an instance-based thing, so they'll actually sort of sit outside. But for the most part, anything that you want to play with data, it's going to be locked down. VPC is your best buddy. Really good. One thing you also may notice is I clearly am not a PowerPoint guy. I'm up here for a whiteboard or just sitting down with the paper and scribbling or whatever. So no pictures. Well, there are pictures, but they're suck. You'll see why in a minute. Alright, number 3. So, now you've got your VPC. Green fields. What do you want to do with it? Well, you want to chop it up a bit to start, using things like S3 or Glacier or something like that for offloaded storage, database dumps or whatever. You actually need some way of transferring that to S3 because S3 sits outside your VPC. You need an NAS instance to go out and get to it. Okay. And the last way we like to look at is the virtual private gateway, which is basically like a VPN concentrator that sort of plugs into your virtual private cloud and allows other people to attach VPN connections so you can start creating site-to-site sort of networks. So this is actually really cool if you're going to have multi-region redundancy. So you can actually have one, so for example, we have a setup in Singapore with lots of redundancy things like that. another setup in Sydney, lots of stuff inside that. And I actually have site-to-site dedicated running through DPG, so that we can replicate things like LDAP databases, public config, and other sort of configuration data and other critical sort of application data to sites. Nice and safe, nice and secure, everybody happy. Alrighty, it's also good for office access as well. If you want to access from your certain offices, that's exactly good. Alright, so let's actually put it together in a very dodgy looking work example. Okay, I apologise for my artwork, but really I can barely put a stick with it on boxes and diagrams. So, fairly typical kind of three-tiered sort of web app, reasonably secure kind of architecture where we try and separate things out, make it nice and scalable. So we've got our web apps, they can be a Rails app, PHP, cake, or whatever the heck you want to build, apps, what you crazy kids do these days. Service layer for your sort of back-end processing services, and of course, our little friend database. Everybody loves a database. As you can see, you've got a bit of crossover, redundancy, internal load balancing, however you've done it. That's really important. So, first thing, it's all going to go inside the VPC. Nice and easy. Before we hit the next one,
You didn't notice it, don't say anything.
wait for it. One thing I will sort of say as part of this example is that the ones on the right, they're going to be running in availability zone A. The ones on the left, the ones on the right, they're going to be running on availability zone B. Okay, so we've actually got a little bit of geographic redundancy. So if you're running in Singapore, tidal wave comes in and what takes out half the island. Hopefully with a bit of luck, Amazon not planning that at least one of those data centers is going to survive. Across that bridge. Alright, so, what we're going to do is we're going to put some subnets. These are little subnets. You can see we call out ACLs, rules. Subnets can talk to each other. You'll notice I've put subnets on different sides as well. That's because subnets can only work in a single availability zone. They can't actually cross availability zones. A little bit of a pain in the bum, but you know what? Yeah, it's still a good tool, and I highly recommend using it. So you can see we've sort of created some rules that allow these guys to talk to each other, these guys to talk to each other, so on and so forth. You'll notice also that to make things a little bit easier, I've actually put my services and database in the same subnet. A couple of schools of thought whether that's a good idea or a bad idea, and there's no one really right or wrong on that, and it does actually make your life a little bit easier, and things are still nice and secure because, so just to word some of things, we also have security groups that allow us to apply templates. So we can create a database group that will only allow us to talk to the services group, that will only talk traffic from our web app group. And you'll also notice that security groups are not constrained by availability zones. As I said, they really are just a template. So whilst technically there's a box around everything, really what that should be is a little green box and there, and there, and there. Okay? I've just drawn it just to show that the same template can be applied to multiple instances. Right. Remember before I was talking about having a bastion host, being able to apply rules for security groups to multiple templates to instances. Here's our bastion, it's like a subnet. Notice also we've got a security bastion group runs around everything. So I've used that group to imply, to show that my bastion is allowed to actually connect to all my servers. Okay? Another one. And the last set of some other open up some holes. So, over here, we're talking about the VPG, Virtual Private Gateway. So VPN concentrator from the office. I'll allow that to set up the rules there. So it allows access to the bastion. There we can sort of go. Okay. Yeah. So as we can see in the back here, we have our elastic load balancer, and that's going to be our gateway to get to the outside world. See that it's in subnet. Rules to allow traffic between those subnets. You'll also notice that what I've done is I've actually extended the security group. Remember before I said security groups only apply to EC2 instances? Not entirely true. They also can apply to ELB, so they're actually sort of talking. This is the same thing. Our ELB will route out through our VPC's internet gateway. Happy people. Gives you a little bit of an idea of the tools that Amazon make available to build a secure network. I think that's it. One more. Yep. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. The main tools. I haven't sort of covered off S3 and Malaysia, but they're also great tools for storage of data. It's encrypted. Those. Talk briefly about VPS redundancy or any sort of serious detail. If you want more, go to the website because there is a metric ton of documentation and it's actually really, really good. That's it. That's all I got. Questions? I'll have to try this. Nobody will do this thing. Sorry? I don't know. I thought you said challenges. I'll be looking at for you, mate.
All right, do we have questions?
Any questions?
Big.
Okay, I'm going to come to you because I cannot hear the word you're saying. Any suggestions for VPNs? Okay. So initially when the VPGs were sort of rolled out, you could only kind of use Cisco routers and one or two types of Cisco, one or two types of Juniper routers. My personal recommendation would be to use something like OpenVPN or OpenSwamp, which are actually quite good. You can now use VPG to VPG VPNs as well. So if you're running from a small office, yeah, I would use something like OpenVPN to create a connection. It makes life a lot easier for you. If you have a much larger office, there's a list of recommended VPNs, but most higher end Cisco's will certainly happily connect up without too many drives. This is not an endorsement of Cisco, it's just a thing that is. Anything else? That answer your question? No? One question. Sorry? Yes.
Then move on based on that. Yeah.
So there's a number of example configurations on there. So if you like to sort of delve under the hood and hack away with your VPN connector of choice, I imagine that you'll get pretty far and should be able to do it. It's relatively straightforward. Anything else?
All right. We good?
Awesome.
Great.
All right, good job, All right, so there's one thing that we can learn from Aaron is also read the documentation. That wasn't a
RTFM.
We do have a lot of documentation, guys, like insane amount of documentation. So you guys need to make sure you use it if you really want to know how to use the services. Yeah.
Yes.
And let us know if you can't find it. It's a maze, so we can help you find it as well.
Oh, the other thing is get the support. Pay for the support. It's totally worth it. Give them money. It's actually worth it.
Most of the time. Most of the time.
All right, so now, Marco, when demo us secret demo, right? I hope it's good.
Yeah, of course.
think I've seen this one before.
Yeah. Okay.
How can you type music?
Yeah, I can. So, good evening, everybody. So, who am I? Some of you may have not seen me. So, I'm Markku. I'm a technology evangelist at Amazon Web Services. I handle APAC, and that's it. So, focus on developing. That's the main thing for today. We've seen some really cool stuff. I love the app. I'm going to be a beta tester. Yay. So, one of the ways that you can focus on developing something that you have seen before. So, quite often we have shown elastic beanstalk. So, that's not new. So, why is he showing beanstalk again? Well, coming to that. So, with elastic beanstalk, you can just do the green thing. So, you just make the application, and beanstalk builds the container for you. And it builds all the infrastructure on your behalf. That's really cool, because then you don't have to worry about booting EC2 machines, creating load balancers and everything. Auto-scaling, all these can be done by Beanstalk. And until now, you were able to use these languages because Beanstalk had support for these containers. So Beanstalk would install Apaches and whatever to run Node.js and these. But now, drum roll, there's something new. Docker! Ooh, have you guys heard of Docker?
Kind of.
Who has heard of Docker? Yeah. Who has used Docker? Couple. All right. So this is something new. Actually, the feature is about 3 weeks old. Yeah. Sorry I couldn't get here earlier, but I'm trying to show you new things. So 3 weeks is not too bad. That's it. End of slides. Start of demos. Huh? Okay. Olivia, can I ask some help, please? I can't really hold this microphone. Yeah. Thank you. My lovely assistant Olivia here. Also in the police.
You need to move your back to side while you're at it.
Oh.
See, that's how you work your way up here, you know, maximize.
Exactly, yeah. That's how we roll. Okay. So the first thing I want to show you guys is that, ladies, that if you want to use Docker on Mac, you actually can. So what is Docker? Docker is a really cool way of containerizing, if that's a word. You can put your application in a container, just throw it to your friend, throw it to another machine, and it will run nicely because all the dependencies and everything are there. It actually uses features in the Linux kernel, which are UFO technology and magic. It just works. Mac doesn't have a Linux kernel because it's not Linux, it's actually BSD Unix with a Mach kernel, which is really cool. Look into that. So on Mac, if you want to use Docker, you actually need to use VirtualBox. Maybe some other ones work as well. But if you go to docker.io, which is the main website, then there's a Mac installation thingy, which is not too long, it's only a couple of pages. So that's how I did it. So it works on Mac as well with VirtualBox. And actually, on Mac then, you have this command called boot to Docker. Because this is the one that initializes the virtual environment and that then runs to Docker. So currently, on my machine, I'm not running boot to Docker, so that's not running. So let's fix that. So first, I'm using boot to Docker. Oh, it's running already. Okay, never mind. So boot to Docker status shows that we are running this VirtualBox VM that is handling Docker for us. How did I install it? Well, just brew install boot to Docker. Very easy. So now we have a Docker environment that we can use. Next we need Docker. Well, I used brew to install that as well, so that's the command Docker. Very easy. So with the Docker command, there is a repository. So what you can do, for example, is this. So this is now local in my machine, right? So you can execute Docker search, for example, Drupal. Just as an example, because today I use Drupal as the example. So you can see some public images that people have contributed that have Drupal. So that's nice. And then you can just pull and download these images. And if I execute Docker images, we can see what's on my machine. Well, not too many. I just have this Drupal image here. So you can see that there is a Drupal. That's one of those community ones that I downloaded. There's the image ID. Right. So let's first use Docker locally. So I'm going to now run this one. So that's Docker and run. And let's first do some port forwarding. So I want to be able to actually access the application that I'm running in the Docker container. So I'm going to do port forwarding for my local port 4980. I'm going to forward the Docker container's local port 80. So the Drupal web server port is going to be accessible on the 4980 on my machine. And I'm going to run this image in a daemon mode. And which image? Mole, I guess that's the guy or lady who made it, and Drupal. So this is the name of the image that I want to run. One of those images local in my machine. And then it gives you a cryptic answer. That's actually then the container that you will be running. And with the Docker command ps, I can display which containers I'm running. So you can see that now there's a container, this one. It's been running for 9 seconds. And Docker is actually a lot faster than virtualization because it doesn't use a hypervisor. It uses UFO technology and magic. Yes, part of the Linux kernel stuff. Yes. All right, so now it's running. Is it really working? Well, let's test it. Remember, I did the port forwarding thingy. So let's try to access that port on my local machine. So localhost and 4980. Yes. So now we're running Docker on my machine, which is running the Drupal image. And this is the site install, so the first page you'll see when you run Drupal, yes. And if I now stop the container, I need to give it the container ID, bye-bye. Now I'm stopping this container on my local machine, and if I refresh the page, it should not work after a while anymore. Now it should be gone. Yeah, so now it's gone. So that's it for the local one. Of course you can do more things with Docker, it's pretty cool, take a look at that. But I just wanted to show you how to use Docker locally on a Mac. Well, that was it. Now the big thing then, or the next thing is that we can use Elastic Beanstalk to deploy exactly the same container in the cloud. And Beanstalk runs Docker, and Docker runs your application. So it's like an onion or inception of inception. It kind of works, UFO and magic. Yeah, remember that. So on this directory here, I have the stuff from the Docker container for Drupal. You can see that there's a file. So this is the application itself on my machine here. There's a file called Docker file. So the Docker applications can either be an instruction or installation template, or they can be an image which is self-contained. So earlier I showed you the image on my laptop. Now let's take a look at the other one. With the Docker file, basically when Docker runs this application, it's a cookbook, a bit like CloudFormation or Chef, Puppet or Ansible. So with this set of instructions or commands here, Docker is building the application. So you can see here that it's using Debian as the base image, cool. Then it's using apt-get, very cool. And installing stuff like Apache Web Server and these. And then it's downloading Drupal, and it's installing Drupal with Drush, which is the Drupal installation thing. So you can see that it's an orchestrated installation. So the Docker file is something like a Chef recipe or Puppet recipe or Ansible playbook, but that's for Docker. So how do we get this to be installed? Well, let's be good citizens and initialize a Git repository first locally here. So git init, git add -a, git commit -m, my initial release. So now we have version control with local git here. Now I want to put it to Elastic Beanstalk using the new feature. So eb is the Elastic Beanstalk command line, eb init, just like git init. So eb init, those are my keys coming from the config file that I have made when I installed the tool. Let's deploy this to Elastic Beanstalk in Singapore. So I select number 5. Name of the application, it's fine, I take the defaults. It's definitely a web server-based application, so I select number 1 here. And now the new thing. Dun-da-da, Docker, okay, that doesn't zoom, never mind. So I will select number 65, which brings us a Docker container in Elastic Beanstalk. So I will select as the container type Docker. And some of you may know that I've been complaining kind of that Beanstalk doesn't run COBOL. Now you can. because you can have a couple application inside a Docker image and run it in Beanstalk, if you want. I will select a single instance in this case, and I don't need a database because actually that Docker image or the Docker file installs MySQL within the Docker container, so I don't need a second database. IAM role, I'll just select the default one, that's it. That was EB init. Initialize, I tell Elastic Beanstalk what do I want to run. And then simply I need to just EB start, which is then deploying it. And now my machine asks, or the command line tool asks, do you want to deploy the latest version of this application here on your machine once the EB container is running? Well, yes, please. So Beanstalk is now going to provision the hardware, which means the EC2 instance, and then put Docker on this instance. And then once Docker is running, it's going to get from my local Git the latest version of the application, Drupal, Docker image, and put it inside that Docker container in Elastic Beanstalk. Just like I did it locally, I'm now pushing it up to EB. Of course, Elastic Beanstalk has to build the environment first, so it has to provision the EC2 instance first. And here it is. Now it's starting or launching. So this is going to take something like maybe 8 minutes or so. It's too long for us to wait. It's very, very boring for us to wait that 8 minutes. But you get the idea. Once this is running, it will push from my local Git that Docker application and run it here in Elastic Beanstalk. So that's how you can do local development and then push it to production using Elastic Beanstalk. That's it. Any questions? Cool, not cool, semi-cool?
I didn't know we support Docker now.
Yeah.
It made life a lot easier.
Yeah.
3 weeks old, new stuff.
It's cool. Very cool. It's a lot of things going on.
Yeah, you can run Cobol and Lisp and Fortran.
I was going to say, what about Fortran?
Yeah, can. Also can. Now any language works. With UFO technology and math. All right.
I'm assuming you can also upload ready sort of made full sort of Docker images.
Yeah, that is actually, I have not edited it in any way. So I have the same Drupal application as an image in my local Docker, and as a Docker file, which is an orchestration thing in Elastic Beanstalk, but it's the same exact one from the same repository in the Docker global repository. I just wanted to show both the image and the orchestration.
Now, what I'm getting at is instead of uploading the orchestration, so say you've been using the Docker image for a while, and you've got data in there and that sort of thing, you think, yeah, okay, now it's ready to actually throw on. Can I take the whole image and put it up in there?
To my understanding, yes, I need to test that still. So, yeah.
Well, I'll take that as yes.
Yeah. Let's test it. Cool. To my understanding, yes. You can just throw the image to that local Docker. Not local, it's more like remote because it's in the cloud.
Yeah, admittedly you can, right?
Yeah.
Obviously you can.
Of course you can. Why couldn't you?
Also can.
Stupid question.
Yeah.
Stupid question. Stop asking stupid question.
So people seem to really like Docker now, I mean in general, not just in the cloud circle, but Docker is a really cool way of packaging applications and you don't have to worry about any damn RPM dependencies or whatever, because everything is built into that container. This is cool.
Yeah.
So Git and Docker for the win.
What's RPM?
Huh?
Pardon my ignorance, what is RPM dependencies?
RPM is a form of hell made by our friends at Red Hat. I love Red Hat, but I do not love RPM. Because if you want to install something, it's complaining that you're missing something. When you try to install that, it says you can't install it because you have something else. That's why I love Debian. It's just apt-get. Yeah. Woo. Now we're getting into geekiness of Linux.
We've got Yum though.
Yum is a copy of apt-get.
How about make install?
I still don't know the answer.
Yeah, dependency hell. So RPM is this package manager from Red Hat. It's good, but didn't really solve the problem of people installing and uninstalling weird things, and then it got into a kind of mess. Somehow Debian never gets into a mess because it's just good.
Yeah.
This is Markus' opinion. We love all the Linux distributions, all of them work on it.
So you're saying we're all friends here. Debian has better UFO technology?
Yes. Exactly.
Actually, to be fair, Docker does work an awful lot better with Debian or Ubuntu-based installs rather than CentOS and things like that.
Somehow, actually, the Docker base images seem to be Ubuntu or Debian, so people seem to like that. Cool. Any other questions? All right. Thanks, guys and ladies. I hope you really enjoyed it, and let us know what you want to see next time. Thank you.
Yeah.
So that was the shortest demo from Marco ever. But I
It's still going to take 8 minutes.
I'm really meaning to try Dockers, and now it's dead. I didn't know it's dead. Yeah, that's pretty cool, man. Yeah, I feel like we do something now.
Good.
Sit down. Maybe you would really know.
Hackathon.
What's the thing you use for this?
Image.
It's a container.
Yeah. No.
Let's think about Vagrant.
Yes.
It's not really like Vagrant, because Vagrant is a virtualization.
Right.
So Docker is a container that you run on top of Vagrant or not.
So basically,
I'm not saying like Docker, really not.
So basically, you can compare this with, let's say, Puppet, rather than comparing it with Vagrant, because Vagrant is like dependency.
Yeah, Vagrant is a really virtualization. Yeah. You shouldn't compare it with So go to docker.io and read.
RTFM.
All right, we're gonna wrap up now. If you have any feedbacks, you can tell Aaron. But I don't care.